Hello, learners. Welcome to Module 4, where we begin exploring the vital themes of gender, sexuality, and reproductive rights. Today's lecture, the first in this module, focuses on gender inequality and its far reaching impact on reproductive and child health. In previous lectures, we discussed policies, monitoring, challenges, and future directions in RCH programs. Now we move towards understanding the social forces that shape health outcomes. Gender inequality is not just a social injustice, it is a determinant of health that directly influences maternal mortality, child health, and family planning. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify how unequal gender relations restrict health access and outcomes, and why addressing gender is central to improving reproductive and child health. Gender is not merely biological differences between men and women. It is a social construct that defines roles, responsibilities, and power relations in the society. These socially determined roles shape how people seek healthcare, who determines roles, who controls decision making, and how resources are distributed. In the context of reproductive and child health, gender determines whether a woman can access antenatal care, use contraception, or decide whether to give birth. Gender is therefore a fundamental determinant of health outcomes, and addressing gender inequality is a prerequisite for improving addressing gender inequality. Gender is therefore a fundamental determinant of health outcomes, and addressing gender inequality is a prerequisite for improving RCH indicators at both the national and global levels. Gender inequality refers to the systematic disadvantage of one gender, primarily women, arising from unequal power relations in the society. Patriarchal norms assign higher value to men and male children, while women's roles are restricted to reproduction and domestic work. Structural barriers such as discriminatory laws, unequal access to education, and limited employment opportunities reinforce these inequalities. In healthcare, these barriers manifest as restricted mobility, lack of financial independence, and denial in decision making authority. Gender inequality thus permeates multiple layers of society, shaping women's health opportunities from the household to the health system. The link between gender inequality and RCH outcomes is well established. High maternal mortality often results from women's inability to access timely and skilled care due to lack of autonomy or resources. Limited use of family planning stems from restrictions placed of women by partners or families. Children's survival is also linked to gender, as girls in many societies are less likely to receive adequate nutrition and attention along with immunization and healthcare. These outcomes illustrate that gender inequality is not an abstract concept but a lived reality where direct consequences for health and survival of mothers and children. Maternal health is heavily shaped by gender norms. In many communities, women's mobility outside the home is restricted, requiring permission from the male family members to visit health facilities. Even when complications arise due to pregnancy or ill health, women may not have the authority to decide to seek help. They may have to take the permission from the males of the household, leading to delayed delays. Gendered expectations that women must prioritize household duties over their own health further discourages timely healthcare seeking. These constraints increase the risk of women's maternal and these constraints increase risks of maternal morbidity and mortality, highlighting how gender inequality manifests in life or death scenarios for pregnant women. Gender norms extend into child health, where preferences for male children leads to unequal care. In many households, boys are prioritized for nutrition, education, and healthcare, while girls are often neglected. This results in higher rates of malnutrition and mortality among girls. Immunization gaps are observed, with boys more likely to be fully vaccinated. These patterns reflect deeply ingrained cultural values that devalue girls, perpetuating cycles of disadvantage among generations. Addressing child health therefore requires addressing gender bias with families and communities. Now, family planning illustrates how gender inequality directly affects reproductive rights. In many families, men controls decisions regarding contraception, leaving women unable to make independent choices. Women may face opposition or even violence if they attempt to use contraceptives secretly. Limited contraceptive choice, compounded by supply side gaps, further reduces women's autonomy. Myths and misconceptions about family planning are often perpetuated by patriarchal norms, discouraging women from seeking information. This lack of agency undermines the goal of informed choice and limits progress towards reproductive health for all. Gender based violence is a profound barrier to reproductive and child health. Women experiencing intimate partner violence often face forced pregnancies, unsafe abortions, and limited access to health services. Sexual coercion reduces women's ability to negotiate safe sex, increasing the risk of sexually transmitted infections and unintended pregnancies. Violence during pregnancy is associated with poor maternal outcomes, preterm births, and low birth weight babies. The trauma of violence also undermines their mental health, further complicating care. Addressing gender based violence is therefore essential not just as a rights issue but as a health imperative. Socioeconomic inequalities exacerbate gender disparities in RCH. Women with low education are less likely to understand health needs or navigate health systems. Employment inequality and wage gaps reduce women's ability to pay for care. Economic dependence on male family members reinforces power imbalance, limiting women's autonomy in health decisions or any kind of decisions. Studies consistently show that educated, economically empowered women are more likely to seek care, antenatal care, delivery facilities, and use contraception. Thus, addressing socioeconomic inequality is fundamental to improving reproductive and child health outcomes. Cultural practices deeply rooted in patriarchy continue to shape RCH. Early marriage exposes girls to adolescent pregnancies, increasing risks of maternal and neonatal mortality. Son preferences drives discriminatory practices such as sex selective abortion and neglect of girl child. Dowry related violence adds further risk, where women face abuse or even death linked to marital transactions. These practices not only violate human rights but also directly worsen health outcomes for women and children. Tackling them requires sustained community engagement and legal enforcement, of course. Nutrition is a classic area where gender inequality manifests subtly but powerfully. In many households, women eat last and the least, often after serving the male family members. This leads to maternal undernutrition, anemia, and poor pregnancy outcomes. Undernourished mothers are more likely to give birth to low birth weight babies, perpetuating intergenerational cycles of malnutrition. Children, especially girls, also face unequal food allocation. Addressing maternal and child nutrition, therefore, requires addressing intra household gender norms and ensuring that women's nutritional needs are prioritized. Access to health services is shaped by gender at multiple levels. Women often require permission to travel to health facilities and may lack transport or resources to make that journey. Financial barriers compounded by women's economic dependence further limit access. Even when women reach facilities, they may face discrimination, neglect, or disrespect from providers, which discourages utilization. These structural and interpersonal barriers create a vicious cycle where women underutilize services, reinforcing poor health outcomes. Ensuring equitable access requires addressing both external barriers and attitudes within the health system. Access to safe abortion services is another domain heavily influenced by gender inequality. Although legal in India, under the MTP Act, many women face restrictions in exercising this right due to lack of autonomy, social stigma, and misinformation. Women often seek unsafe abortions in secrecy, risking their lives. Adolescents and unmarried women face additional barriers. Gender inequality thus pushes women towards unsafe practices, contributing to maternal morbidity and mortality. Strengthening access to safe abortion is therefore both a gender and health priority. Gender inequality does not operate in isolation. It intersects with caste, class, religion, and geography to produce compounded disadvantage. A woman who is poor from a marginalized caste and living in a remote area faces multiple barriers simultaneously. These women are often excluded from mainstream services and have the poorest RCH indicators. Intersectionality helps us understand that addressing gender alone is not enough. We must also tackle the other structural inequalities that shape women's health outcomes. Engaging men is essential for addressing gender inequality in RCH. Male involvement in reproductive health can reduce resistance to family planning and promote shared responsibility. Men's support during pregnancy and childbirth, such as accompanying women to clinics or assisting with childcare, improves maternal and child health outcomes. Encouraging men to challenge patriarchal norms and support equitable decision making is vital. Programs must therefore focus not only on women but also on men as partner, allies, and agents of change in reproductive and child health. Adolescents face unique challenges linked to gender inequality. Early marriages forces the girls into pregnancies before their bodies are ready for it, increasing risks and complications. Lack of comprehensive sexuality education leaves adolescents uninformed about safe practices. Gender norms restrict access to contraceptives or reproductive health services, especially in the case of unmarried adolescents. Boys, meanwhile, face pressure to conform to masculine ideals that discourage health seeking. These inequalities leave adolescents vulnerable to poor reproductive and child health outcomes, highlighting the need for adolescent friendly interventions that challenge harmful gender norms. India has recognized the role of gender in health policy frameworks. The National Health Policy emphasizes gender sensitive planning and service delivery. RCH programs are increasingly incorporating gender considerations, such as ensuring female health workers at facilities and addressing gender based violence. Gender mainstreaming strategies encourage all health programs to consider gender impacts rather than treating it as a separate issue. However, gaps remain in translating these policies into practice, and stronger accountability mechanisms are required to ensure gender is not overlooked in implementation of these policies. Globally, gender and reproductive health are anchored in international frameworks. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women obligates countries to eliminate gender discrimination. The ICPD program of action emphasized reproductive rights, women's empowerment, and gender equality as central to population and development. The Sustainable Development Goals further reinforce commitments to gender equality, like in SDG 5 and in health, like SDG 3. These frameworks provide advocacy, tools, and benchmarks for holding governments accountable to gender sensitive health policies and practices. India illustrates how gender inequality shapes RCH outcomes. The skewed sex ratio at birth reflects son preferences and sex selective practices. Early marriages remain common, exposing adolescent girls to health risks. Maternal mortality, though declining, shows disparities across states and social groups, with marginalized women facing greater risks. These patterns reveal the embedded nature of gender inequality in social norms and health systems. They also highlight the need for targeted interventions that address both cultural practices and systemic inequalities. Building gender responsive health systems is essential for overcoming inequalities. Facilities must be designed to meet women's needs, with female staff available and privacy ensured. Respectful maternity care must become the standard, where women are treated with dignity and compassion during childbirth. Providers need gender sensitive training to recognize and challenge their own basics. Gender responsive health systems do not only improve health outcomes, they also empower women by affirming their rights and agency. Such systems are the foundation of equitable RCH programs. Community based approaches play a vital role in addressing gender inequality in RCH. Women's self help groups and collectives provide safe spaces of learning and empowerment. Community dialogues help challenge harmful norms and open discussions on sensitive issues like family planning, gender based violence, particularly monitoring where communities evaluate health services, promotes accountability, and ensures women's voices are heard. By engaging these communities, programs can change the underlying gender dynamics and shape health behaviors, leading to more sustainable improvements in RCH. Education and empowerment are long term solutions to gender inequality in RCH. Girls' education delays marriage, reduces fertility, and improves maternal and child health outcomes. Economic empowerment through income generating activities gives women the financial independence to make health decisions. Leadership opportunities in community health programs and platforms increase women's influence over local priorities. These interventions address root causes of gender inequality, creating structural change that improves RCH outcome across generations. Health facilities must actively address gender based violence as part of RCH services. Screening women for signs of violence, particularly during antenatal care, can identify those in need of support and help. Referral systems linking health facilities to shelters, counseling, and legal aid are essential. Stronger legal enforcement and advocacy are needed to deter perpetrators and protect survivors. integrating GBV response into RCH services not only saves lives but also empowers women to reclaim their health and dignity. Media and communication strategies can be powerful tools for addressing gender inequality in RCH. Campaigns that challenge harmful stereotypes, promote shared responsibility in childcare, and portray empowered women as role models can shift public perceptions. Mass campaigns such as Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao highlight the value of the girl child. Local communication efforts through theatre, radio, and digital platforms can address myths and encourage behavior change. By shaping norms, media can complement service delivery in promoting gender equality in health. Gender inequality intersects closely with issues of sexuality and reproductive rights. Women's sexual autonomy is often denied, with decisions about contraception, childbearing, and even marriage made by others. This directly undermines reproductive rights, which are recognized as human rights in international frameworks. Addressing gender inequality is therefore central to fulfilling reproductive rights and ensuring that individuals can make free and informed decisions about their bodies and their lives. RCH programs must embrace this rights based approach to create a sustainable change. Innovations are emerging to address gender inequalities in RCH. Gender sensitive technologies such as safe delivery kits and digital tools for women's health education empower women with knowledge and resources. Male engagement models where men are actively involved in antenatal visits and family planning challenge traditional norms. Gender budgeting ensures that resources are allocated equitably, considering the unique needs of women and girls. These innovations provide practical pathways to embed gender sensitivity into programs and policies. The future of RCH must place gender at its core. Gender considerations should be mainstreamed into every program, from design to evaluation, rather than treated as an add on. Equity is not only a moral imperative but also a strategy for building resilient health systems that can adapt to crisis. Strengthening accountability through gender disaggregated data and community participation ensures progress is real and measurable. These future directions will move RCH towards more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development. To summarize, gender inequality is a root determinant of reproductive and child health outcomes. It manifests in maternal mortality, child malnutrition, limited contraceptive use, and poor access to services. Patriarchal norms, violence, and socio-economic dependence perpetuate these gaps. Addressing gender inequality requires both systemic reforms in health systems and social change in communities. Empowering women, engaging men, and challenging harmful practices and ensuring rights based approaches are central to achieving equity in reproductive and child health. In conclusion, gender inequality is both a social injustice and a health barrier. Gender equality is not just a goal, it is the foundation for better health. Thank you so much for today. Next, we deal with lecture 24, that is sexual and reproductive rights as human rights. Thank you.